Playing with Power MTG now has a Patreon. When you support us on Patreon, you can get early access to Decklists, videos, and Patreon-only videos like commentary, raw footage, and more. Check out the link in the description below and subscribe today. Playing with Power is also supported by Flipside Gaming. When you use the promo code POWER in all caps, you get 10% off orders $10 or more. It saves you money and helps us out at the same time. Finally, please subscribe to us on social media. You can find us on Twitter and Facebook. Check out the description below and subscribe today. Thanks. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Playing with Power MTG, where we play with the most powerful cards in the most powerful formats. Tonight's battle brings back some familiar commanders and some new ones as well. So let's start out by showcasing our fighters this evening. First, we have Mike piloting Najeela, the Blade Blossom. This mid-range deck aims to bring out Najeela early, pressure the board, and inevitably get infinite attack phases. Mike's opening hand contains an Underground Sea, a Marsh Flats, Nature's Claim, Llanowar Elves, Chrome Mox, Flusterstorm, and an Aven Mind Sensor. Next, we have Folger, bringing back Yidris, Maelstrom Wielder. This deck aims to connect with Yidris and storm off with its added Cascade ability. Folger's opening hand contains a Mystic Remora, Breeding Pool, Llanowar Wastes, Yawgmoth's Will, Dramatic Reversal, Helm of Awakening, and Abrupt Decay. After that, we have Garrett, bringing back the 3-color pairing of Silas Wren and Thrasios, Triton Hero. This Sultai deck grinds value through the graveyard by milling and casting through Silas. Garrett's opening hand contains a Bloodstained Mire, Seedborn Muse, Snow-Covered Island, Cyclonic Rift, Search for Azcanta, Vampiric Tutor, and Talisman of Dominance. Finally, we have Ryan, bringing back Breya, Ethereum Shaper. This combo deck uses the graveyard to pull out its win cons while controlling the board to execute its combos. Ryan didn't like his opening hand, so he mulligans it away. His final hand contains a Cabal Ritual, Talisman of Dominance, Grand Abolisher, Gemstone Caverns, Exotic Orchard, Windfall, and a World Gorger Dragon. Without further ado, let's dive right in. Ryan wins a game of Russian Roulette and gets to start us off. He's not super happy about it though, because his opening hand contains a Gemstone Caverns. Ryan plays a Gemstone Caverns for turn. He casts a Lotus Petal. He passes. Folger plays a Breeding Pool, into play untapped, paying 2 life. He casts a Mystic Remora. Super pleased with himself, he passes. This is when everyone talks about not feeding the fish, and so we all decide to do so, hoping that he peters out and sacrifices it. Mike plays a Marsh Flats for turn. He stares down the Mystic Remora and passes. Garrett plays a Bloodstained Mire for turn. He stares down the Mystic Remora and passes as well. Ryan plays a Plateau for turn. He stares down the Mystic Remora and also passes. Folger groans heavily that his turn 1 Remora isn't working out. At the end of Ryan's turn, Garrett cracks his Bloodstained Mire for an Underground Sea. During his upkeep, Folger pays for his Mystic Remora, hoping it'll pay off. He plays a Stomping Ground. He ends his turn. On his turn, Mike cracks his Marsh Flats, fetching up a Badlands. He plays an Underground Sea. He casts a Chrome Mox. Everyone yells at him for breaking the fish pact they all made, and Garrett responds by casting Vampiric Tutor, also breaking the pact. He fetches up a card onto the top of his library and loses 2 life. Chrome Mox resolves, and Mike imprints Llanowar Elves under it. Next, he casts his commander, Najeela, the Blade Blossom. He passes. Garrett plays a Flooded Grove for turn. He casts a Bloom Tender. He gives the turn to Ryan. Ryan plays an Exotic Orchard for turn. He casts a Dark Confidant. He ships the turn to Folger. During his upkeep, Folger pays for his Mystic Remora. He plays the City of Brass for turn and passes. During his turn, Mike immediately moves to his attack phase and attacks Folger with Najeela, triggering her ability and creating a 1/1 White Warrior tapped and attacking. After that, he wraps up his turn. Garrett plays a Wooded Foothills for turn. He cracks it for a Tropical Island. He casts what appears to be his favorite card, Search for Azcanta. Next, he casts his commander, Silas Wren. He ends his turn. During his upkeep, Ryan's Dark Confidant triggers. He reveals the top card of his library, which is a Tundra. In his main phase, he plays a Tundra for turn. He casts Cabal Ritual. Next, he casts Grand Abolisher. Afraid of what it will do, Folger taps the City of Brass to cast Vampiric Tutor. He fetches up a card onto the top of his library and loses 2 life. Grand Abolisher resolves. Ryan follows up by sacrificing his Lotus Petal for a blue and casting Windfall. Everyone discards their hands and draws 8 due to Folger's hand size. A special note should be given that in that discard, Ryan discards Ariok Salvagers and World Gorger Dragon. All wrapped up, Ryan moves to his end step and discards down to 7. During his upkeep, Folger lets his Mystic Remora die. He plays a Windswept Heath for turn. He casts a Mana Vault. He cracks his Windswept Heath for an Overgrown Tomb into play untapped, paying 2 life. He casts a Dark Confidant. He follows up by casting Culling the Weak, sacrificing his Dark Confidant as part of its cost. Mike responds by casting Dispel, targeting Culling the Weak. The spell is countered, and Folger sighs at the unfortunate 2-for-1. Next, he casts a Felwar Stone. After that, he suspends Wheel of Fate. All through, he passes the turn. On his turn, Mike starts out by casting Preordain. He scries 2, thinks for a while, decides to bottom them, and then draws a card. He casts Imperial Seal. He fetches up a card onto the top of his library and loses 2 life. He follows up by casting Birds of Paradise. He attacks Folger with Najeela and a warrior, triggering her ability again. He gives the turn to Garrett. During his upkeep, Garrett's search for Azcanta trigger goes onto the stack. He looks at the top card and decides to mill it, which is an Isochron Scepter. This triggers Azcanta's ability and transforms it into Azcanta the Sunken Ruin. Also during his upkeep, he casts Limdul's Vault. Limdul's Vault resolves and he looks at the top 5. He doesn't like what he sees, so he pays 1 life and looks at the next 5. He does this an additional 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way up to 11 times before he finds his card that he wants. He shuffles his library and arranges the top 5 accordingly. In his main phase, he casts a Mana Vault. He attacks Folger with his Silas Wren. Silas Wren connects, and Garrett chooses Isochron Scepter in his graveyard. In his second main phase, he casts his Isochron Scepter from his graveyard. Everyone is suddenly very aware of what it was he was searching for with his Limdul's Vault. Mike responds by casting Force of Will, exiling Swansong and paying 1 life. Isochron is countered, and Garrett moves to Plan B. He casts a Yawgmoth's Will. Will resolves, and he starts off by proving to everyone what he searched for with Limdul's Vault by casting Dramatic Reversal, untapping all of his non-land permanents. He follows up by casting Ashiok, Dreamrender. He activates Ashiok, milling Folger for 4, and exiling everyone else's graveyard. Many groans are heard across the table, especially from Ryan's side, as his graveyard full of win cons is exiled away. He plays a Bloodstained Mire from his graveyard. He cracks it for a Breeding Pool untapped, paying 2 life. He casts a Dimir Signet. He follows up by casting a Talisman of Dominance from his graveyard. He casts a Sylvan Library and decides to pass the turn. During his upkeep, Ryan's Dark Confidant triggers and he reveals a Flusterstorm. He plays an Ancient Tomb for turn. He taps his Ancient Tomb and 2 other lands to cast Frantic Search. He draws 2, discards 2, and untaps 3 lands. He casts a Brainstorm, drawing 3 and putting 2 back on top. He taps his tomb again to cast Dimir Signet. He follows up with a Talisman of Indulgence. He casts a Mox Opal and then ships the turn to Folger. Folger plays a Grove of the Burnwillows for turn. He casts his commander, Yidris. He passes. Mike plays a Carpet of Flowers. He moves to attacks and attacks Ashiok with 4 of his warrior tokens and 2 more at Garrett directly. Garrett chunk blocks 1 with Silas, putting Ashiok to an intentional 1 loyalty, and Garrett takes 2. In his second main, Mike adds 3 green through his Carpet of Flowers. He casts Null Rod. If the groans at Ashiok earlier were loud, the groans now are even louder at the table. He follows up by casting Avacyn's Pilgrim and an Elves of Deep Shadow. He passes to Garrett. During his draw step, Garrett draws an extra 2 through his Sylvan Library. He decides not to pay any life and puts them back on top. He plays a Windswept Heath for turn. He cracks it for a Bayou. He then casts Windfall. Ryan, not liking what he's about to throw away with a still active Ashiok, decides to cast Pyroblast, targeting Windfall. Windfall is countered, and Garrett follows up by activating his Ashiok, milling himself this time, and exiling everyone else's graveyards. He follows up by casting his other commander, Thrasios. He ends his turn. During his upkeep, Ryan's Dark Confidant triggers, and he reveals a command tower. He plays his newly acquired command tower for turn. He looks at his hand, and decides to pass. Folger plays an island for turn. He thinks for a second, looks at the board, keeps his mana up, and passes the turn. During his main phase, Mike adds 3 green through his Carpet of Flowers. He casts an Eldritch Evolution, targeting Avacyn's Pilgrim. Everyone knows that this is super bad, and they know exactly what he is going to tutor. So in a Hail Mary, Ryan casts Flusterstorm, targeting the Evolution. Mike immediately pays for it. With Flusterstorm resolved and Eldritch still on the stack, Folger decides to fall on a sword for the team and throws his own Hail Mary, tapping his City of Brass and casting Ad Nauseum. Ad Nauseum resolves, and Folger reveals a Diabolic Intent, Blood Crypt, Exotic Orchard, Ponder, Forest, Summer Bloom, Golgari Signet, Limdul's Vault, Sensei's Divining Top, Talisman of Impulse, Mystical Tutor, Noxious Revival, and then he pauses and thinks. There are only 2 cards he could reveal that he could cast with his 1 open mana that would not kill him and that would save the table, and that is either Chain of Vapor or Nature's Claim. Sitting at 2 life and knowing that it's all or nothing, he decides to keep going. The next card he reveals is an Abrade, killing him. Everyone erupts at the table from the bold sacrifice from Folger, hoping it would work out. Unfortunately, it did not, and Eldritch Evolution resolves. Mike fetches up a Derevi, Imperial Tactician, untapping his Badlands as it enters. He proceeds to attack everyone with his warriors, generating more warriors, and using Derevi's untap ability to untap his mana, and create infinite attack phases and infinite warriors until the table is dead. Ladies and gentlemen, that was quite a game. Big props to Folger for his all-in play to save the table, knowing it would most certainly guarantee his loss. Sometimes you get what you want, and sometimes you don't, but that's just how the game goes sometimes. Congrats to Mike on his win with Najeela. He piloted the deck very well, working around his setbacks like Ashiok, and waiting patiently for his opportunity. Garrett's deck was full of really big value, but unfortunately it didn't play out like he wanted this time. Ryan's Breya deck was set up for success with windfalling his win cons into his graveyard, but the disruption of Ashiok definitely made the game certainly more difficult to win. The most valuable card of this game would be Ashiok Dreamrender. It completely blew out Ryan's game plan and held off Mike's win con of Eldritch until it was gone. This card is quickly becoming a format staple. The most valuable player of this game goes to Folger, in his big sacrificed against all odds play of Ad Nauseum. That about does it for this game. Join us next time as we duke it out to see who will be king of the competitive EDH table. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.